Okay, good afternoon. I am Bob Patillo, your host of On the Menu. It is Wednesday, March the 3rd, 2021. We have a very special guest today, the world famous Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Rabbi Lapin, thank you for being with us. How are you today?
Looking forward. Thank you, Bob.
I wanted to tell people how I found out about you, first of all, briefly. And I was walking through Barnes and Nobles a few years ago, and I happened to see this book called Business Secrets of the Bible. And I like to study business. I like to study the Bible, and being a magician, I love secrets. So I thought I couldn't go wrong with buying that book. What I didn't realize is the impact it would have on my life and my family's life, especially trying to teach my kids the things that I've learned from Rabbi Lapin. So, Rabbi, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and your family and how you got to be where you are now?
Certainly, Bob. Well, now at least I understand the magician background. You obviously are skilled and experienced at forcing a card on an unsuspecting member of the audience. And you forced a card onto me. I didn't know I was going to have to talk about myself. I much prefer talking about some of the powerful and compelling ideas that you and I are both interested in. But just to give you a quick nutshell, my father was a famous rabbi, and his father before him. And so from the very youngest age, naturally, I knew beyond any shadow of a doubt in terms of what lay ahead for my future, I was beyond doubt that absolutely, certainly, there was no way I was ever going to be a rabbi. And one of the facts of life that I discovered is that when you deliberately ignore what the good Lord has in mind for your destiny, he's liable to whack you. And so I started off as an electrical engineer, which I figured was about as far away as you could get from the trade of my father and my grandfather. And so I happily went to work for a Dutch electronics conglomerate called Philips. And after a few weeks, I was on the verge of going crazy. You know, of course, that solitary confinement, Bob, is not a reward for busy executives, right?
Correct.
It's actually a torture. We human beings are built for connection. We're built for communication. We're built for collaboration. And there I was for 5 days a week, stuck in my design cubicle, working on a tiny, tiny little corner of a huge piece of equipment. And then once a week, we'd have an hour meeting where we'd talk with people working on the adjoining pieces of equipment, just to make sure that our interfaces and handshake protocols were right. And then off back to solitary confinement. And one day, I sat down in the canteen for lunch next to two other folks, and we started chatting, and I told them, you know, I'm an electronics engineer, and they said, oh, we're tech reps. And I said, well, what's a tech rep? I've never heard of that before. And they said, well, basically we sell what you design. And see, you design it, it then goes to manufacture, and then when it's built, we go out and sell it to the final user, and in this case, highly advanced communication equipment. So I said, what's it like? You know, what do you do? And they said, you know, well, we call on customers, and we try and integrate and align their interests with the interests of our company. You know, this is what we have available. We try and solve the customer's problems, and we talk to them. And then sometimes they ask us to talk to different departments in their organizations. And then little by little, we try and bring it into some kind of transaction that benefits everybody. Well, I said, this is very interesting indeed. I went back to my supervisor and I said, I'd like to put in an immediate request for an immediate transfer out of design to tech rep. And he said, "You're not going to like that." And I said, "Why am I not going to like it?" He said, "Well, because the base pay is much less than you're making now." I said, "Forget the base pay. Talk to me about the commission." And he did. And I said, "Put in that request. I'm out of here." And I spent a very happy period of time as a tech rep, making much more than I made as an engineer, and enjoying it, interacting with people, solving problems. And that was when it began to dawn on me that I would rather be involved with people than with things. And you know, as they proverbially say, one thing led to another, and business is the place where you are dealing with people. And the other thing that's great about business is that when you want to learn how to drive a racing car, you go to my friend Mario Andretti, and you say, "Hey, can you teach somebody to drive a racing car?" And he'll say, "Sure, I taught my son Michael, and he's pretty good." And I'll say, "You bet he is. He's almost as good as you." And Mario says, "No, he's actually better." I said, "I don't know about that, but how would you go about teaching someone?" He said, "It's fine. I would take him down to the track and put him behind the wheel. We'd do a few circuits. I can sort of see how bad he is, and then we'll figure out what we have to work on." I said, "Do you want to know if he's married or not, or if she's married or not?" He said, "No, I couldn't care less." I said, "Are you interested in his financial state?" "No, I don't really care about that either." I said, "Does his faith concern you?" "No." "If he's a gregarious, friendly sort of person, or an introverted?" "No." He said, "I really don't care about any of that stuff." If you want to teach somebody to play tennis, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. You really don't care about any of those things. But if you want to teach somebody to be effective in business, well, then it does depend on all of those things. They all matter very much indeed. And in this sense, the complete business professional is an echo of the complete human being, in a way that is not true for tennis players or racing car drivers. And that's one of the reasons that I am where I am today, and why I'm so excited about what I do, working with business professionals around the world, enhancing their effectiveness.
Rabbi Lapin, tell me about, you have another book called Thou Shalt Prosper.
Yeah.
I would like to know the story about how you decided to write those books, and could you give us a little summary of what you have in those books, a little taste of that?
Now, Bob, you'd think lowly of me if I did the last thing you requested. Why on earth would I give you a summary instead of encouraging you to just go out and buy a copy, which you've obviously done? Summary, I'll think about that for a moment. Why or how I came to write them. I got asked by a lot of my Christian friends. Constantly I was asked, you know, there's really not a bigoted bone in my body, but I can't help wondering, you know, don't be insulted or anything. Sort of lots of warnings always came before the question, but could you tell us, you know, why are Jews, like, how come Jews are so good with money? And I said, I'm not insulted in the least. I'm actually flattered, because it's always wonderful to be good at something, and there's no reason ever to be insulted because you're good with something, unless you have such a negative view of money, which is quite possible in the culture, that anybody who's good with it is de facto deficient morally or in any other way. So I found that to be a fascinating question. And so I worked on that, and I interviewed over 100 business professionals, non-Jewish, who had worked with Jews during their professional lives. And one of the things I wanted to find out was whether the Oxford English Dictionary definition of Jew as a verb was correct, as in to Jew somebody, to rip them off. And I realized that if that was a secret of Jewish business success, I didn't think it was, but I needed to be honest and do a thorough scientific investigation before I wrote this book. And And I figured that if the secret to Jewish success was incredible moral flexibility, that meant you rip people off, which obviously is an advantage in business in the short term, not in the long term. If you feel comfortable ripping people off, and you're also comfortable moving to a new country every month, then you can function. But because of the magic of reputation and the way things like Google make reputation more real, I discovered that the secret to Jewish business success was not ripping people off. There was, an equally dumb explanation was the idea that there's somehow a money gene in Jewish sperm that gets passed on from generation to generation. And again, that was fairly easy and quick to debunk. And so I was finally left, after debunking 4 flagrantly false reasonings or explanations, I was left with the real one, which is that embedded in the Hebrew scriptures are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spiritual strategies and practical tips and tools and techniques for functioning effectively in the business world. And then my job was simple. All I had to do was spend 10 years decoding it and condensing it and setting it up in the form of Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for making money. The book was originally about twice as thick, but the publishers said, could you just take out anything having to do with God? And so I said, well, the publisher's the boss, they pay me. So yes, I'm not happy about it. I think it's a mistake, but I will do that. If it means I have to take out an awful lot of real and effective and useful material, but if that's what you want, so I did that. And the book went on to be the stunning bestseller that it continues to be. And so the publishers came back to me about a year after that book was published, and they said, we were wrong. Do you think you could take all the stuff you took out at our earlier request and turn it into a new book? And I said, yeah, provided you let me call it Business Secrets from the Bible. And they said, yeah, whatever you want. So that was the genesis of the second book.
Rabbi Lapin, tell us some characteristics of people that are unsuccessful in business that you've noticed.
People who are unsuccessful in business are people who are over-intelligent. People who are over-intelligent end up on the faculties of universities as professors. And any of us in the financial services industries knows that almost nobody is worse at personal finance than professors and intellectuals. So that's a huge problem. Again, it affects such a tiny part of the population because the overwhelming majority of us live right there in the middle of that bell curve where we're all, within an average range of IQ, that it works, for most of us, it works just fine. So that's a handicap. Another handicap is, it's the person who thinks that because of his degrees, he went to business school, or he went he got his bachelor's in finance and marketing, and he doesn't realize that it's all about relationships. And so somebody like that doesn't understand why he's not progressing. Then perhaps of all of them, I think the one I'm going to mention third, but it's in ascending order of importance, probably the most common and the most devastatingly dangerous and destructive idea, which is deeply embedded in the minds of so many of us, and it is hugely damaging, and that is to believe that making money is the function of greed and of a venal personality. In other words, people who simply have no idea that the field of business is one of the most dignified and moral undertakings available to anybody seeking a life and a career. And the reason for that is because, well, it's for the same reason, as what happened in 1953 when Edmund Hillary climbed to the top of Mount Everest, and along with Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, the two of them were the first people to reach the summit. And of course, since then, it's not that tens of people have gone up, hundreds of people have gone up. There's actually a littering problem on Everest right now. There's just so little oxygen, nobody has the energy to pick up all the Snicker bar wrappers that are littering the mountainside. But a lot of people go up there now. And the reason that nobody did it before Edmund Hillary is very simple. And that is nobody believed it was possible. People died in the attempt. And it's the same thing that happened a year later in 1954. Roger Bannister was the first person to break a 4-minute mile. And today, hundreds of college athletes break 4-minute miles. I'm not saying I could do it, but it's not that hard. People do it. You train and you do it. A 4-minute mile today is not, absurd. Why didn't anyone do it before May 1954? And again, the reason is doctors said, this tendency to believe experts. Well, the doctors said the human being will die in an attempt to do a 4-minute mile. It's not possible. Well, of course, it was possible. And the reason people can do it now today is because we now know it can be done. And success in business is a lot like that. If deep in your heart, you believe it to be a reprehensible activity, you believe that you're not making money, but that you are taking money, well, then obviously nobody can succeed. No decent human being can succeed at doing anything that deep in his heart he considers to be morally reprehensible. So I'd say the biggest problem of all is people do not understand the nature of money, and they assume that money is a purely tangible commodity, and that therefore, if I have a bunch of it, there must be a bunch of people out there who don't have it anymore because I took it from them. And that's essentially the entire enabling philosophy of socialism. And so many, many people are impacted by that. Many people are involuntarily indoctrinated by entertainment. The overwhelming majority of primetime murders on television are committed not by gangsters, not by illiterate, conscienceless thugs. The majority of murders are conducted by business professionals on television. I think everybody's familiar with the scene where the camera pans in on the gleaming glass skyscraper, and finally it comes in through the window on the top floor, and we watch a heroic young woman telling the CEO of the company that she has discovered that this company is polluting the landscape. And what does the CEO do? Well, he opens the top right-hand drawer of his desk. And what does he pull out? Well, he pulls out what everyone knows business professionals keep in their desk drawers, and that's a stainless steel .357 Magnum revolver. And he's just about to shoot her dead when the United States cavalry bursts through the door and the credits start rolling. But we all get the message that business is bad. Business people are dishonest. And the truth is, as part of my research, I checked to see whether a greater proportion of business people have been indicted for dishonest or illegal business practice, or what percentage of doctors have lost their licenses for sexual assault of patients or operating under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and what percentage of public school teachers are banned from being in a classroom. And in both cases, the percentages are higher than the percentage of business people who are indicted. And I think the answer to that is very clear, which is, and it's the whole reason that a reputation has value in business, right? When Chrysler bought the Jeep name for $1.5 billion, they weren't buying factories and inventory and dealerships. Jeep was dead. All they were buying was a name and a reputation. That's it. And names and reputations tell you something. So when a business professional has been in business for a long period of time, you can rest assured that his track record talks, and that his conduct has been beyond reproach. Otherwise, people wouldn't do business, because in the final analysis, whether you're buying a car or buying a suit, whatever you're doing, I mean, you're looking for a plumber and you ask a friend for a recommendation. What you're counting on is reputation, right? When you go to see a new doctor, you have no idea where he graduated in his class out of medical school. And you have absolutely no idea what medical school he went to. As a matter of fact, you probably don't even have any evidence that he went to medical school. You just assume that he must have, but you go to him because he's been an effective business professional. He has persuaded, over the course of a period of time, a large number of patients that he's good for them and to them. And that's why your friend recommended them. And that's how business works. It is essentially a moral and dignified undertaking. And the majority of failures of people in business are because deep down they believe that business is a reprehensible activity and they cannot bring themselves to throw themselves heart and soul into it.
Daniel, when I started in business 32 years ago, I felt like that the reputation of being in business was a lot better than it is now. Do you have any ideas on why that's changed over the last 3 decades?
Oh, it happens all the time. People say to me, Rabbi Lapin, why is business where it's today? Or Rabbi Lapin, why are these changes happening? And I have to tell you that I'm not at all persuaded that is the case, Bob. I'm of the opinion that there has been a massive program of slandering of business. I gave you an example in entertainment. Little by little, that has an impact on people. I did an experiment proving this at a high school a couple of years ago, where I asked the teacher to ask everybody to stand up and give a 30 or 60-second description of what their ambition is, what they'd like to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years. And Bob, what happened was that one girl got up and she said, I want to become a child psychologist so as to help children cope with the traumas they're going through. And the whole class applauded. And a guy got up and said, I want to become an environmental engineer to make sure everybody has enough food and water. Several people got up and said, I want to give back to society, so I'm going into government and I'm going to work and become a politician. And everybody cheered. And then I remember one girl got up and said, I want to build a corporation that provides something valuable for society, and I want to become a millionaire before I'm 30. And there was dead silence. And I raised the question. I spoke to the class and I said, so automatically you assume that somebody who's going into government, and you realize that that means that your taxes have to go up because somebody has to pay their salary, and that somebody's you. And the girl who wants to build a business, the only way she gets your money is through your complicity. In other words, you have to voluntarily give her your money. It's not like government that can tax it. You have to voluntarily give your money because what she gives you in exchange is something you value much more. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
And she and this girl was so grateful. She came up to me after and she said, I always feel bad. They always shame me about my desire to make money, as if there's something wrong with that. And in fact, the language illustrates the extent to which people believe what you said about business people. Whenever a business philanthropist makes a generous bequest to some organization, by the way, I don't know if you want, Bob, I see we've got a lot of people. I don't know if you want people to put questions on the chat alongside or not.
No, I was busy.
Huh?
Yes, anybody that wants to ask a question can do it through the chat, and I'll be glad to ask.
Terrific. So what happens, Bob, is that the commentators and the news reports all say the same thing. When, say somebody gives a big gift to some charity or to a hospital, whatever it is, they always say, oh, isn't it wonderful to see them giving back to society? Well, that's an expression that I loathe and I detest. Because if you say that giving charity is giving back to society, what does that say about what I was doing in the first place while I was making the money? I must have been ripping off society if giving charity is giving back to society. And nothing could be further from the truth, because as a business professional, I can only get your money through your willing and voluntary exchange. Or to put this another way, it's something I'd said to that same class. I said, does everyone in this class have at least $1 bill in their pockets? And if you don't, just tell me. No, everybody had $1 bill. I said, now take out the $1 bill, or take out 5 or 10, whatever you got, hold up the $1 bill. So there I'm looking, and there were like 24 dollar bills fluttering in the air as people held on to them. And I said, go on, don't worry, just hold on. I'm not going to ask you to pass them up to the front. This isn't a collection. I just want you to look at that $1 bill for a moment. And now I'm going to ask you, all of you who held up a convenience store, and that's how you got the $1 bill, I want you to put it back in your pocket. Nobody did anything. I said, any of you held up a little old lady, you mugged an old lady, took her pocketbook, and that's how you got the $1, put it back. I don't want to see it. I said, well, this is very interesting. You're all still holding it. Okay, fine. If any of you defrauded your fellow citizens and cheated them to get that money, put it back in your pocket. I don't want to see it. And again, so I said, this is really interesting. Every one of you has some money, and not a single one of you held up a convenience store, mugged a little old lady, or defrauded anybody. In that case, I know how you all got that money. And the answer is, you pleased another one of God's children. And then I said, oops, I forgot this is a public school. I'm not allowed to say the word God. You pleased another human being. Because the only way you got that money is somebody put it in your hand or your bank account. That somebody was either a customer of yours, or a client of yours, or an employer of yours, or maybe a relative, but there's somebody who was so happy with you that they actually gave you that money. And this is one of the reasons that you probably feel that business isn't today what it used to be. And I'm not sure I agree with you. I think it is. I think it's every bit as what it used to be, and may even be better. But in general, business professionals today remain beacons of integrity and pillars of their community. Just take a look and see who supports every local charity in town. And I'm telling you now, it's not the public school teachers, and it's not the doctors, it's the business professionals all the time.
Rabbi Lapin, I heard you speak one time, and you talked about the importance of counting or accounting. Could you speak to that a little bit?
The importance of counting or accounting. Well, I'm not sure. Was this something I spoke about at whatever event that was?
You were talking about the importance of knowing where you are financially.
Oh, sure. Yeah, right. Of course. Thank you. Look, if you want to lose weight, and I'm not saying this is not autobiographical in any way, shape, or form. I'm not talking about me. But if an unspecified human being wishes to lose some weight, then you need two things. You need a scale, and you need a notebook or an app. Because if you're not able to measure your weight and you don't keep a record of it, nothing is ever going to change. And so it is, if you are setting out in the field of business, or you have been for a while, please do yourself a favor. And in addition to that, you'd make me happy if you just went ahead and took a simple course in how to read financial statements. It'll stand you in very good stead when you analyze a company. Maybe one day you're going to buy a business. Maybe you're just going to invest in the stock market, and you need to know how to read an annual report. And I don't mean read the stories in the annual report, because I'm also good at making up stories. It's the numbers that matter, not the story. And so you don't want to, you don't want to read an annual report that's got 100 pages of pictures of headquarters and stories of accomplishments. You really just want to read the 5 pages at the back that show the balance sheet and the profit and loss. And so it's very, very worthwhile. It's a worthwhile investment of time and very little money to just master the secret of bookkeeping and financial statements. Won't take you long, won't cost you much, but you'll be way ahead of the competition once you can do that.
Thank you. You mentioned investing just a minute ago. Can you share with us some of your ideas about maybe specifics, maybe not, but about investing, because it seems to be a mystery to a lot of business owners?
There are so many different approaches to investing. And so you, first of all, obviously, people have to determine, at what stage of life are they at? What are they looking for? Security, security is a big issue, right? Because what a lot of people don't realize is that most governments inflate the currency. Now, don't believe the line that you keep hearing, well, a little rate of inflation is good and healthy. They say that. I mean, it's just pure propaganda. You're being told that because governments like inflating. And you need to understand why governments like inflating. And the bottom line is that it is fun spending other people's money. It just is. And so what inflation does is it allows he who has control of the printing press to keep it running. And the way this really ought to work is that whenever two human beings effect a voluntary transaction, there is a net increase in wealth. So if I would give you an example, I had a grandfather who was a traveling salesman. He was a peddler. And I can give you just a quick insight into one of his days, right? Grandpa Lapin, and I'll save you the disappointments, but just looking at the highlights, Grandpa Lapin knocks on a door and says, hey, I'm here to see if there's anything you have to sell. I buy stuff. And the lady said, well, we got an old table. Grandpa Lapin says, what are you planning on doing with it? She says, well, we're putting it out in the alley on Tuesday. The city will come by, pick it up. Grandpa Lapin says, for free? And she laughed and said, when will the city ever do anything for free? Of course not. They're going to charge us $5 to take it away. So Grandpa Lapin says, okay, if I took it away from you for free, you're already $5 better off than you were before, weren't you? She says, yeah. He says, but I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to give you $5 as well. She says, for that, I'll help carry it out to your pickup truck. He says, I was about to ask you. So they put the table on his truck, and he gives her $5. Now, I just want to make clear that everyone understands that this family is now $10 better off because Grandpa Lapin knocked on their door, right? Right? A minus times a minus is a plus. So she did not have to pay out $5 to the city. So that's like a gain of $5. It's not like, it is a gain of $5. Plus Grandpa Lapin gave him another $5. So this family is up 10. Now Grandpa Lapin stopped at the hardware store and spent $1 on some nails and some paint. And he painted out some scratches and he nailed up a wobbly leg. And he knocked on the next house. Now, in reality, it might have been more houses, but doesn't matter for now. And he says, anyone here need a table? And the woman says, well, yeah, my daughter's getting married next week. He says, terrific. Does she have a table yet? They call the daughter, and the mother says, Agatha, this man wants to know about your table plans. She says, well, we were going to go buy one at Ethan Allen for $20. And Grandpa Lapin says, well, I got one out on my truck you can have for $10. Now, mind you, it had scratches. I've painted out. It had a wobbly leg that I nailed. The girl says, you know what, we're starting off, I'm happy to save $10. Let's take a look at it. They look at it, they love it, they carry it in, and they give Grandpa Lapin $10. Now, Bob, here's the point we come to where I get to ask you some questions. Is that okay with you, Bob?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My question to you, Bob, is how much better off is this family than they were before Grandpa Lapin knocked on their door?
Everybody's better off.
How much money is this family better off by? Bob, you got to work with me if this is going to get anywhere. She was going to pay $20 at Ethan Allen for a table, but she's now paying $10 to Grandpa Lapin.
Correct. She's better off by $10.
Absolutely. Now, somebody is going to pop up on the chat saying, hey, wait a minute, though, you've done Ethan Allen out of a sale. And so just to clarify, we're not pulling any rabbinic smoke and mirrors here. This is very straightforward. Ethan Allen's condition is totally unchanged. We've not done anything. The asset value of a table in their inventory, their retail, whatever it's on their books for, yesterday is exactly where it is today. Ethan Allen's totally out of this picture. They've got nothing to do with it. We've not hurt them. We've not helped them. We've not harmed them. They're there. Whatever they had yesterday, they still got today. But this family actually has $10 that they didn't have yesterday. They actually are better off by $10. Now, next question, Bob. And this is the last question for today. How much money is in Grandpa Lapin's pocket? What did he make on this arbitrage? Well, it's easiest to do by going backwards. This family gave him $10. How much did he pay out to the other family? 5.
Did you say 5?
5, that's right.
Yes.
So you'd say he has 5, but you've forgotten that he stopped at the hardware store. And he paid them $1. So Grandpa Lapin has $4 in his pocket. And so what is the overall benefit? What is the aggregate cash benefit that this village has enjoyed by virtue of Grandpa Lapin knocking on 2 doors and visiting a hardware store? Well, it's $10 the first family, $10 the second family, and $1 in the till of the hardware store. And so the family, the village is better off by $21 just because Grandpa Lapin drove his truck through and stopped. And that's not even counting the $4 in Grandpa Lapin's pocket. Now, before anybody thinks that, oh, Michelle got it dead right. Look at that. There she says, $24. Oh, I actually no. Sorry, Michelle. It's $20. It's each family got 10. That's 20. And the village, I'm talking not about Grandpa Lapin, just the village. The hardware store has $1 he never had before. So it's $21, I think, unless I'm making a mistake here. I'm sure you'll all correct me if I am. But the village is better off by $21. And just in case you think that this is just, I'm messing you around or fooling with your mind, I'm not. This is, well, let me put it this way. I checked with eBay a little while ago. I wanted to know typically how many transactions in eBay are going on at any given moment. Do you know what the answer is, Bob?
I do not.
70,000 transactions going on at any given moment. And so I am able to describe eBay now as 70,000 Grandpa Lapins all working simultaneously. Do you follow?
Yes.
Because eBay is buying from some people, selling to others. When I say buying, they're letting you or they're letting somebody make a bid for your object. But because eBay is Grandpa Lapin, and so he's letting one person buy something from another person, and both people are now better off than they were before. That's why eBay's in business. They're supplying a real service. And guess what? In eBay's pocket, they've got an arbitrage. There's some money they're making as well. And that is a quick description of the beauty of business. Now, when Grandpa Lapin's finished this series of transactions, if a truly honest government was in charge, they would now print 21, well, I guess $24, like Michelle said, because, or 25 maybe, they would print exactly the amount of money that was brought into being. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
After Grandpa Lapin came through this village was better off by $21. Where did that $21 come from? It didn't get taken from anybody. It got produced out of nowhere. In exactly the same way that if I show up with a saxophone, Bob, you're going to say, Rabbi Lapin, where did you get that saxophone from? And I'm going to have to say, well, I stole it off Duke Ellington. And, or I bought it maybe. But if I show up with a tune, you don't ask me where I took the tune from. I made it up. It came out of nowhere. There's a difference between musical instruments and musical tunes. And money is more like tunes than it is like saxophones. It comes into being. And so what the government should do is print exactly the amount of new currency to match the number of dollars that came into being at that moment or every day. It's very difficult to know, but there are ways. The truth is, however, that most governments don't do that. Most governments print 3 or 4 or 10 times that amount. And in so doing, they are lowering the value of everybody. Now, this started off as a discussion on investment, and it's going to close off on investment, which is that if you keep your money in your pillowcase or under your mattress, then you are losing a substantial slice of it every single year because its buying power is dropping substantially. Now, if this is news to you, what I would recommend you do is go and find out what $100 of 1960 would be worth today. Or alternatively, the other way around, what $100 today would be worth in 1960. And you're going to be horribly shocked. $100 today was worth so much less. In other words, in 1960, what $100 buys today, in 1960, a small amount of dollars would buy that same amount. In other words, money has lost huge slices of its value since 1960. And so you have no choice but to invest, right? Because everybody should keep some money on hand, and hopefully your nest egg grows. What are you going to do with it, right? If you just put it under the mattress or in a financial institution whose equivalent is under your mattress because it's giving you 2% a year, you are losing every single year. You're losing substantially. As a matter of fact, you're far better off borrowing money than making money. Or if you're going to just leave it in your mattress, rather go borrow money because you'll pay it back with cheaper dollars.
Rabbi Lapin, you just discussed capitalism, a very great example of that. Tell us your ideas on socialism. We hear a lot about that now.
Well, socialism is less of a political credo than it is an evil and destructive pathology. And I think it's helpful for people to understand what that's based on and why that is the case. Essentially, it contradicts the essential creator. And here it's difficult for me to leave out the area of faith. And so what I do is I explain to people, look, you may have been somewhat indoctrinated to believe that it's rude and it's in bad taste to talk about God or religion. I get it. My own publishers used to believe that. But there's certain things that are important to bear in mind. One of them is, for instance, that no capital market ever grew indigenously in a non-Christian country. And you either have to ascribe that to coincidence or you have to understand the spiritual nature of money. But it's, today you've got stock markets in Accra or in in Calcutta or in Bangladesh or in Zimbabwe. You've got stock markets all over the world, but they only arose indigenously in Christian countries. In other words, the relationship between faith and money is far more important than you've ever dreamed. And it's not an accident that in the most effective creator of wealth in the history of the world, the phrase "in God we trust" is not painted on the walls of churches, but it's printed on the currency you use every single day. And that's because they understood back then the incredibly powerful relationship between faith and money. And so part of all of this is recognizing the uniqueness of every single person. When it says, God said, we'll make man in our image, that doesn't mean, that, human beings look like God sitting on a cloud somewhere. We've got to be a little less childish about it. And we've got to understand that when we say let's make man in our image, what that means is that just as God has the capacity to create, human beings have the capacity to create as well. And in this sense, we are indeed different from every other creature on the planet. And part of the act of creation is exchange. If one dog has a bone, another dog says, tell you what, give me that bone today, I'll give you 2 bones next week. There'd be no transaction because every dog is identical. And that means every dog has exactly the same instincts, which means every dog has the same desires. So right now, every dog on the planet would like that bone that just fell off the butcher's truck. And the notion of exchange or that I have a different desire, it's very, very unique to human beings. Now, socialism works and predicates entirely on the proposition that humans and animals are exactly the same. Humans are a little more sophisticated. Some humans have more hair than some animals or less hair than other animals. Some of us have better eyesight or worse eyesight than owls. But we're all basically on the animal spectrum. And believing that, the idea of human uniqueness vanishes. We don't call myself, in my culture, I don't call this thing a fingerprint. I call it a soul print. Because, Bob, I said I had no more questions for you for today, but I'm going to throw one more at you if you permit me, Bob.
Yes.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, sir.
You do like living recklessly, don't you, Bob?
I love it.
All right. Well, here comes the question, Bob. You know that identical twins means they have the identical DNA, right?
That's
and you know
correct.
that DNA is the information that creates the human being, every detail of the human being, right?
Yes.
And so I pose this question to you, Bob. Do 2 identical twins in utero, do they have the same fingerprints or different fingerprints?
They have different.
How can that possibly be? Why would you answer something that can't be? How you're telling me something that cannot be, because there is no additional information. Both little creatures, both little boys or both little girls have identical DNA. That's why they're going to look the same. And even similar things happen to them in their lives, as some of the fascinating twin studies have shown. And yet you're insisting that they have different fingerprints. I've never heard anything so absurd in all my life. How on earth could they have different fingerprints? And your answer can only be, I don't know, but they do. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You don't know how, but they do. And in answering that way, you're answering exactly the same way that doctors and biologists around the world have answered since this question first was asked. And, people come up with various epigenetics. Epigenetics doesn't mean anything. It's just a way of speculating that certain gene structures turn on and off in response to certain things. And the hope is that maybe that can explain fingerprints. Of course, nobody knows that it does or can. Bottom line is the problem remains. And the answer is because fingerprints are an essence of our soul. If you could clone yourself, Bob, and I don't know about you, but the thought of cloning me strikes me with sheer terror. But if you could clone me, that clone would also have to have separate fingerprints, because that clone would have the same body but a different soul, just the way that two identical twins have the same bodies but different souls. One of those twins could be a person of courage and optimism. The other one could be cowardly and pessimistic, because those are spiritual characteristics, and spirituality is not carried genetically. So the reason that I label socialism, not only, it's not the opposite of capitalism at all, because capitalism is just a way of absorbing labor and producing profit. But socialism is an entire lifestyle. It's an entire belief system. And its problem is that it denigrates the human being to the level of animals. It assumes we're all the same, and that's why it is that socialistic structures, like many city and county governments in the United States, have you ever thought about the kind of public housing? What does public housing look like, Bob?
Well, it's usually not too appealing to me.
Not appealing, and it's all identical. Have you noticed? In
Yes.
fact, if you paint your front door in public housing a different color, you get thrown out. Because it's all based on this idea that human beings are just like cats or camels or cows or kangaroos. They're all the same. And what's good for one is good for all. And a system of Bible-based economic freedom allows each person to set their own priorities.
Daniel, when I started studying some of your books, one of the concepts that was really hard for me to get my mind around was that money is spiritual, because I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, no, sure it is. And you've got to get clear on what the definitions of physical and spiritual are. Spiritual is not a synonym for godly, right? Spiritual is not a synonym for piety or virtue. Spiritual just means, very simply, something that cannot be measured in a laboratory. So skin color measured in a lab, sure. Gender measured in a lab. You know, pull me a cell sample and I'll analyze it. I'll tell you if it came from a man or a woman. I'll tell you if it came from somebody with a propensity for large body or petite body. Physical characteristics are all very easy to measure. But if you gave me a cell sample, there's nothing in a lab that would allow me to determine if it came from a person who's courageous or optimistic or honest and has integrity or is a loyal friend. None of those things. And that's because those things are spiritual. Now, obviously, most of the important things in life are spiritual. When you hire somebody for your business, you know, you don't care if they're, for the most part, you don't care if they're male or female or black or white or big or small or have hair or don't have hair. The physical characteristics don't care. You care about whether they have the capacity to talk effectively and market fluently. Spiritual characteristic. You care about whether they have honesty and integrity. You care about whether they have optimism. You care about whether they have resilience and resourcefulness. Those are things for which no test exists. So those are spiritual characteristics. And in that sense, one of the differences between physical and spiritual is that when something physical comes into being, you always need to look and see where it came from. What were the raw materials? And so the saxophone I showed you a little bit earlier, it's made of brass. And I can show you where the brass came from and how it got formed into a saxophone. But if I show you somebody who has integrity, there's no way I can show you where that came from. It's spiritual. And I showed you the example of Grandpa Lapin making $4 by helping other people make $10. That, again, is the bringing into being of something that had no prior raw materials. And so when something can be brought into being out of nothing like that, that is fundamentally spiritual. And so that's why when people say, what's money? I'm not asking for the university definition of Econ 101. Oh, money is a unit of exchange. I also attended kindergarten. I don't need that. Money is something very profound. Is it discs of metal that click in your pocket? No. Strips of colored paper? Of course not. Is it the orientation of iron oxide molecules on the back of your credit card? No. Or ones and zeros on your financial institution's hard drive. or maybe it's when you write out a check, you've brought money into being. Or never mind writing a check, shake hands and say, I'll give you $10 on Friday. All of those things are money, because money is spiritual, it's not physical. Very important for that to be understood.
Rabbi Lapin, we have 3 minutes left. Would you like to tell us about your website? Maybe a little bit about the Happy Warrior.
Sure, right over here. Right over there, www.rabbidaniellapin.com, rabbidaniellapin.com. And right there, you can see my books. You can see a video program where I do 10 hours of teaching on business and finance, and just a lot of resources that I make available, because the richer you become, the richer I become. And that's just good for society. And the proof is very simple, right? No matter what work you do, I don't care if you're a plumber or a shoe polisher or a tailor, whatever you are, you'd rather live in a society with lots of money than a society with no money. You'd want people to have assets, because otherwise nobody would use your services and you wouldn't be able to make a living. And so the more wealth that is created by everybody, the more successful everybody is, and the better off everybody is as well. And that's one of the reasons why it's so wonderful to be a business professional.
Daniel, I've gone through your business class on your website. I found it to be very, very helpful.
Thank you, Bob.
For me, it was great. I'm also in the middle of doing your Scrolling Through Scripture program. Could you tell us about that briefly, and then we'll wrap up?
Sure, of course. Bob, the Scrolling Through Scripture is something I've been wanting to do for a long time. It's when we realize the incredible power of Bible, it is the book that has had more copies printed than any other book in the history of humanity since the printing press was established in 1450 by Johann Gutenberg. And by the way, when he did that, what was the first book he printed? It was not the Vienna Telephone Directory, I'll tell you. The first book he printed was the Bible. This is a book that has shaped Western civilization. And as I said, it's not an accident that countries that are Bible-based produced wealth, countries that are not, did not. Now, today, everybody's adopting that in the same way that banks and bathrooms. You know, if you wanted a bank or a bathroom in Beijing or Bombay or Bangkok 100 years ago, a bathroom was a hole in the ground, and a bank was a guy sitting in an alley cutting off pieces of gold sheet. But at that same time that was going on, banks and bathrooms in Bristol and in Birmingham and in Boston were beautiful places. They were functioning places. And it's interesting to note that after during the last 200 years, banks and bathrooms in Boston and Birmingham did not change to resemble banks and bathrooms in Bangkok and Beijing. It's the other way around. In other words, everybody has adopted the Bible-based Western model. And all of that power resides in Scripture, but it resides decoded within the Hebrew text, what I call the Lord's language. And so scrolling through Scripture is a nearly 10 hours of instruction on the first 34 verses of the Bible, which lays down the entire foundation of what I've been talking about. And I go through in great detail. I have respect for the participants who are studying with me, and so I don't baby it, and I don't water it down. I give it to them exactly the way it really is, and I enjoy it very much indeed. And Bob, I'm happy you're doing it.
Okay. Rabbi Lapin, I want to thank you so much for being here. I think this will be very helpful for a lot of people in our community. The biggest gift you've given us today is your time. As you know, that's the most valuable thing we have to offer. So thank you so much for doing that.
You are very, very welcome. And I'm very happy to have had this opportunity of being with you and with your audience. I know the work you're doing, and I'm proud to be associated with it, even in this small way. So stay in touch, Bob, and best wishes to you and your wife and your family. And I look forward to an opportunity when we'll get together and break bread and have an opportunity to chat and catch up.
Okay, thank you. Well, this wraps up the 25th version of On the Menu. I want to thank all of you for watching and or listening, and stay safe, and we'll see you soon next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Bob.